Hello, and welcome to our webinar. This is Michelle Lanter-Smith, the Chief Marketing Officer here at EPAY Systems, and our webinar today is Combating Workforce Time Theft. Welcome to all of you that have joined us. I'd also like to have a special thanks to my partner here, John Gadayuso, our lead sales engineer here at EPAY. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, everybody that joined us today.
Well, we have an action-packed filled session for the next 45 minutes with you, and are going to be covering a lot of different things, from really what are the different forms of time theft that we see and experience. We're even going to share with you some funny stories that we've heard throughout the years. We're going to look at the different time and attendance, specifically biometric options that you can consider, some of the pros and the cons of each of them, and we're going to show you some of the solutions that we have there to combat time theft. We're also going to talk about ways to identify potential sites and places that might have time theft going on using reporting and analytics. And then we're going to demonstrate some of all of our tools. We're going to show you some of the features on our clock, features on our mobile app, and actually within our time and attendance reporting and analytics solution, so that you can get a better pulse on what's really happening and the cost that might be going out the door there. At the end of the session, we had the opportunity to share with you today's slides and even an ebook on time theft that I think you'll find pretty interesting. First, though, I'd like to cover just a little bit about EPAY and who we are. We are a Chicago-based human capital management firm. We have human capital management software and services that we provide companies around the nation. We started as a time and labor or time and attendance company. We serve clients all around the world. We have locations and sites with the Army. We have clocks on ships. So we are actually, I think, on 5 out of 7 continents. But here in the United States, we have over 150,000 sites that are using our time and attendance solution. We like to offer clients a solution that helps them really get a better hold and understanding and transparency of their workforce and where they are actually maybe losing dollars out the door. We specialize in serving clients that have a blue-collar workforce, hourly, where probably their employees are moving from site to site, job to job, have some really complex payroll, shift differentials, and things like that. That's where we specialize and where we're the industry leader. Our flexible time and labor solution helps them set up these payrolls, helps them moderate compliance risk, and helps them really understand what's happening at each site, even if perhaps a manager isn't there. What we also do is we offer our clients 24/7 support, and that's a premium support that all of our clients get, because your employees are working around the clock and you need that and have to count on that support. And because of that, we boast a very high retention rate. Our customers stick with us because we are the enterprise time and attendance system that really they can't find off of, from other vendors. So that's a little bit about EPAY Systems. Let's jump right into the topic today. When it comes to time theft, there's all kinds of time theft, from people sleeping on the jobs to actually things more associated with punching in and out. We're going to focus a little bit more on the punching in and out in these 3 forms that you see on your screen right here. Taking too long a break, coming too early to work or leaving too late, or actually knowing, as you all know, all employees know exactly down to the minute when they can punch in and get that extra time. And John can cover some of the tools we have that can help you discover that. And then buddy punching. That is a very common form of time theft, where obviously someone is punching in for someone else. And you don't have to deal with that. You can put in biometrics where that just doesn't happen. And it doesn't also have to be biometrics with your fingers or your hand. We're going to talk to you and show you today our facial biometrics. Now, the cost of time theft is huge. Just these 3 forms that we just talked about cost employers in the U.S. $98 billion alone. $98 billion a year. That's a lot of cash. And buddy punching accounts for a lot of it. So in studies that we've looked at, on average, you can account for 2.2% of your gross payroll is really going towards buddy punching. And that's kind of scary to think about that, you know. Who is really punching in to that? We had one employer at one time where, you know, they were obviously, we noticed there was a lot of manual edits, and meaning the manager was going in regularly and changing time. And when we talked to that client, we had them take a look at it, and they're like, that's funny, that's, you know, that's Sam's location. Well, unfortunately, after some time passed, Sam passed and wasn't around anymore, and all of a sudden, those manual edits went away, and things changed. And it turned out that Sam had all of his relatives on the payroll, and he was going in and changing time. So with the analytics that we have, we were able to see and alert them to some of those time changes. So again, it's not always just about using biometrics, it's about using the tools that you have to find kind of funky things going on. So another story that we have that we've seen is in the construction industry, where you know, the foreman's obviously is too busy, not paying attention, and they didn't have time and attendance. And so people were just signing in and out, logging their time on paper. And that time report would go up to corporate, and people weren't really noticing. But then eventually the foreman noticed that the work wasn't getting done. And obviously what were they doing? Someone was signing in and out for that person. And there was really no tracking of the real person being there. So there's lots of stories like this that kind of scare you a little bit. And when you add the whole thing up together, theft, which includes sleeping on the job, or internet surfing, all those things, it's a real bigger problem than just the three things we're going to talk about today. It can add up to 400 billion of lost productivity. So it's definitely something that we should look into, and it really only takes a minute a day, 2 minutes a day per hourly worker, and before you know it, you've got some big costs on your hands. So let's do the math that we are seeing and what we talk to people about, and you might want to do the same thing in your head. So consider this. The American Payroll Association says that the average employee steals 4 hours and 5 minutes every week. 4 hours a week. Now, granted, that could be from punching in too early, punching out, buddy punching, sleeping, all of those things, right? But it is 4 hours. That equates to about 16 lost hours per month, or two days a month. Well, that's 24 days in a year. That's 5 weeks. 5 weeks of lost work time per year per employee. Think about how much money is really walking out the door with that. If that doesn't convince you, take a look at the next calculation. So even if you just said that every employee is costing me maybe a minute of time theft a day in terms of just strictly punching in too early, getting that rounding, and we just calculated it a minute. If you have 250 employees, that's 250 minutes a day of time theft. Again, that's just 1 minute. 250 for your whole workforce, that's 4 hours in a day. If you say the average wage is $19, that's $79 per day. Weekly, that's $237. Annually, that's over $12,000 a year with just 1 minute a day per person.
Yeah, you know, one thing we like to joke around too when we're talking to our customers who are doing things that are manual, we always ask them, what do your manual time cards look like? Do they always say that they're at 8 o'clock, or are there some 8:03s, 8:05s, 8:02s, 7:59s? Because typically they're there at 8 o'clock, even though they may have showed up at 8:07, 8:15, because they're just manually entering in whatever they want. So you can see how easy it is to be able to manipulate a manual time card.
Right, exactly. So you may be thinking, hey, this is great. I really want to do biometrics, but I don't know how I'm ever going to convince my workforce. I'm going to have a mutiny on my hands, right? Believe me, I think John and I have heard that a lot from our customers and or prospects, I should say, that hopefully become customers. And there's some clear things that you need to do. You have to really be very specific and clear in your policies. So that good old HR handbook that you have, dust it off, get it updated, and have very clear policies in there that you're ready to enforce. You need to basically say biometrics is how we're going to do it. Now, if you operate in the state of Illinois, you do have to put some safeguards in place. The Illinois Biometric Information Privacy Act says you need to inform all your employees that you are going to use biometrics. You need to do this, and then you want them to sign off and have written consent that they're okay with that. And you must keep a record of that. So in Illinois, you need to do that, but that's not that much work just so that so you can save that kind of money. Let's go though on to the next page, and let's talk a little bit more about the communication. So I have to tell you, the clients that we have that have the most effective time and attendance policies, where we see the least amount of manual edits, we see the least amount of closed out punches by the managers, are those that mandate that we will use biometrics, and if you forget to punch out, you that day probably won't get caught up until the next payroll period. And it's amazing when you have those kind of rules how compliant people will be. Now, for some of you, maybe that's just not your culture, and I understand that. And in that case, you just need to have clear rules written in your handbook. So you want to talk about everything in your handbook, from tardiness to unauthorized breaks, even cell phone usage. We threw that in there because that's obviously a form of time theft, I guess, technically. So have them, when they get onboarded, again, using an electronic onboarding system like ours, but have them see these rules, have them sign off that they acknowledge it, and you should really have them acknowledge it annually on a regular basis. And as policies change, have them read them, highlight them, and have them look at it again. But clearly state, as on the next slide, what the consequences are that if they do not follow the rules. Are there going to be some sort of deduction somewhere? Is it going to be corrected? Is the time going to be edited or changed at a later date? What kind of consequences will it have? And you need to obviously follow through on that. Another thing you can do is you can use an employee point system. So we have an employee point system on our time and attendance, which basically tallies points for your employees as you can either do positive reinforcement, so as they do good things, they get more points, or you can do negative reinforcement, and you can take away points for negative behavior. But an employee point system will really help you push, I guess, and advocate for this punching in and out.
Yeah, and it's really a non-biased view towards your employees to see, are they showing up when they're supposed to? And if they aren't, then they're not really good employees to me, because they're causing me overtime. They're causing other headaches of maybe not even being there. I need to know that yes, they're here on time and they're a good employee. Now I have a point system that lets me know, so that my buddy, who's my friend, who's working for me, he's late all the time. If he's my buddy, I like him. I'm really not going to report that because I've got that biased view. Here you eliminate that biased view by just implementing a tally system that says, okay, you're late, that's 1 point. You reach 10 points, you're getting a verbal. You reach 20 points, you're now getting a written. You reach 30 points, and now we have to terminate you. So it really takes that out of the equation. But also the important part of enforcing the rules. We had a customer that they complained to us in one particular location that the time clocks never worked. There's always errors in there, and there was always mismatched fingerprints. So we went out to the customer site, and magically everything starts working again. And mind you, we didn't touch anything on our end. We just watched the employees punch in, started correcting them on how to punch in, and everything was fine. We leave, and the same thing happens. Come back, everything's fine. And what we ended up seeing, too, is that the manager on site wasn't really enforcing policies. He was lackadaisical about everything. Somebody wanted to request time off. They just yelled out, hey, so-and-so, I'm going to request time. I want to take Monday off. He's like, okay. Doesn't write it down, doesn't do anything with it. So, you know, your managers are part of this process to enforce these policies. It's not just up to the individual employees. You do need those managers that help to police it.
Yeah, and I think, John, you make a good point with employee points, that it's the system. So, right, you have a schedule in the system, and if someone comes late or comes in too early, the system shows you that, you know, they came in and they came in late, and then the points are added up. So that manager it happens without them, whether they want to or not, and it takes that bias away. So I think that can be really helpful. So obviously using the right tools that you have and putting good processes in place does make this very, very doable. All right. Let's talk, though, about technology, since we're a technology company, and we have some tools that I believe really help save a lot of money for companies. John, do you want to talk a little bit about our clocks and our mobile time tracking and analytics from a high level before we go into it in more detail?
Yeah, so we offer different ways to collect time from the employees, but to also ensure that they are those employees that are punching in and punching out. So with our time clocks, we have fingerprint recognition, so the employee can walk up there and they can use a fingerprint. I typically recommend using a thumb just because it's got the largest surface area of any finger, just to make it consistent so that it's easy and everybody gets the right matching criteria on a regular basis. We do offer facial recognition, though, as well, so we can also do facial recognition. So, you know, hands get dirty, they get cut, you still have a face. We can also do facial recognition with that. We also have our mobile app available, which we could use GPS to identify where the employees are when they punch in and punch out. But we also have facial recognition with our mobile app so that we still have a form of biometrics with that mobile app. But then on top of that, we have our analytics that helps identify where are the problem areas. Who's touching too many punches, right? When we start looking at that, there's different areas that we look at to help identify that. And ultimately what we're doing is we're reducing that amount of time that manager is spending in the system, because we start to enforce the rules. We start to say, okay, hey, listen, you're not punching in and out right. Or, excuse me. Or, you know, Michelle, why are you punching in for John, right? You can start to identify those issues and quickly start to reduce those time theft issues.
All right. So we have a poll that we would like to get answers from you on. This helps us to understand what kind of biometrics you may or may not be using out there. So if you would just type into your keyboard and let us know. You can please select one of them. Fingerprint biometrics. Do you use eye or retina biometrics? Facial biometrics? Or do you not use any form of biometrics at all? Okay, so it looks like, here comes the results. Drum roll, please, John. It looks like 71% of you don't use biometrics at all. Okay, great. Well, then we got a lot more information to share for you. I think you'll find this very informative. So John is going to go into a demonstration, and he's going to start with, I believe, are we going to start with the time clock? So we're going to take a look at our newest time clock. It is a slim biometric time clock that uses facial recognition. It is the same facial recognition that we also can use on our phone in our mobile app.
Yep, and I'm sharing my screen right now just so that we can see the actual clocks themselves. So as we look at the clocks, we've got a couple different models here. So if we look at this particular model, this is our T16. This has the fingerprint reader on board here. What's also important with this is that there is a finger guide in here so that it helps guide the employee exactly how far they need to put their finger in there, but also so that they have consistency with where they place that, which is also important. We also have a camera on here as well so that we can take a picture of the employee. We can do facial recognition with that as well. And then we have other things that we can do with this as well, such as printing out information such as in and out times, timesheets, things like that, messages that you send down to the clock. And then you have the little brother to this, which is, you can see there's a considerable size difference in there. But this one offers facial recognition. So no biometrics in terms of fingerprint on this one, but it does have facial recognition on here so that I can quickly look at myself here. It'll go ahead and register me, and then it'll go ahead and log me in, right? The other thing is that these are very robust. I can slam that on the ground here, and it's still functioning, right? So these are robust clocks, but they work with the biometrics to help identify who that employee is when they're punching in and punching out. Now, the key to that, too, is that we still want to keep a record of when that employee punches in and punches out. So we do have the ability for them to still punch in using a mismatched facial or a mismatched fingerprint. But we still want to capture that exact time that they punch in and punch out so that we don't give them an excuse, oh, the clock didn't let me punch in. And then you're still back at, hey, I had to manually enter in that he was here at 8 o'clock, even though really he was here at 8:05 and I have no proof of it, right? But then also being able to take a picture of who it is to say, was it really John that punched in, or was it Michelle that punched in for him? So you're able to see that from the management side in the software without having to go up to the clock to see that information. You're able to see it within the software. But also, we want to make it easy for the employees, right? Because we want them to adopt the technology. So we want to make it as easy as possible for them to punch in and punch out. And there's different ways that we can set up our clocks to really help with that. But one thing that's important is that we give them an easy menu here where they can clock in and clock out. And we can make it simple where we can auto-select what they're going to be working on so that when they go to punch in, it just punches them into the system, right? Or if I want to have them select something, I can have them select something, right? We also can go in there and allow them to put it in a language of their choice. We currently have English, Spanish, French, Canadian, Polish, Arabic, Italian, and Dutch as language options with our time clocks. So you do have a lot of language options. Again, making it easy for them to see exactly what it is that they're working on so that it's in their native tongue so that they're not having to look at it and say, okay, I don't know what one is. I don't understand what that says because I don't know English. Right? They can put it into Spanish. It's in their language when they get into here. Another thing that we do help with, too, those worker comp claims, too. That's also a problem. We can ask the safety question on the clock out just to help identify, hey, when they left, they said they worked safe. Come back the next day, say they got hurt. Guess what? You left, you said you worked safe. What really happened? We have seen customers tell us that, you know, by utilizing this, they've had the ability to fight back on some worker comp claims because in reality, the employee didn't get hurt at work. He got hurt playing basketball the night before, right? So these are other ways to help reduce those labor costs, not just through time theft options. So as we look at our mobile app here, you know, available on Android and iOS devices, we do have biometrics on here so that, you know, we can do the facial recognition. Also, GPS is a requirement of the app, so they're not allowed to actually open up the app unless they actually have their GPS services turned on. So they'll be prompted. They don't turn them on. They're not allowed into the app itself. So here, it verified me, and now I can go ahead and I can clock in. I can clock out. I can start in my meal break. I can, you know, allocate time if I want to do job costing. I can view my schedules on here. I can send and receive messages to and from my managers. What's great about this is that when I go to clock in, based off of my GPS coordinates here, it's going to go ahead and smart filter my area here. And department, position, work order, those are customizable labels. We call them whatever we want. But it's going to go ahead and pick up whatever I'm closest to and whatever I have access to as well. So that's also important. But as I do this, I can also select, you know, which position I'm going to be working. We can select their default position from there. When I go ahead and select Save now I can go ahead and I can take a picture of myself here just because I punched outside of an acceptable punch radius, which is also an important piece because if I am outside of that acceptable punch radius, I'm also stealing time there because I'm not on site. With the GPS, we can do geo-exceptions where it'll flag it in the system as an exception so the manager knows to go back and review it. And then we can also do the geo-fencing where if I'm not in the area, I don't allow the employee to punch in unless they're there. I can also do geo-tracking if I want to track them throughout the day so that I can see everywhere they were. But also you'll see here this download instructions button. That allows me to download instructions that were uploaded to that particular position, so that if this is something that the employee doesn't go to very often, they still have the ability to see exactly what they need to do at that location. It could be, hey, make sure you complete these 5 things because this is important for this customer. These are the things that we need to get done. So it's just a nice, helpful instruction set to let them know that. Now I also have the clock out here. This is where I can ask my additional questions from an accident-free day, meal break at a station. I could ask, what the temperature was at 7 o'clock in the morning. So really dynamic questions just to help identify that. But like I said, the ability to go in, view your schedules in here, also being able to allocate your hours when you want to do job costing. Now the employee can punch in and out to other things throughout the day as well. But that allocation allows them to punch in and punch out and then allocate their time to different things that they've worked on throughout the day. We give our managers access to see the information that they need, right? I look at this, I've got 3 exceptions in the system. I need to go in and take care of those, but I also can see where they currently are, right? I could also have a labor budget set up, and I want to make sure I don't go over my labor budget. Again, allowing me to see where I am right now. I can see whether or not I'm going over my labor budget, both in hours as well as dollars, right? The key to this, though, is that I have quick access into my exceptions so that I can quickly see those exceptions in the system that, hey, I've got these 3 exceptions here at main office, right? And if I want to look at some other places in here, I can look at all my selected sites as well. But I can go in now and I can see my exceptions at the top, again, making it very easy for the manager so that they don't have to spend more than 5 minutes in the system on a daily basis to make these corrections, right? But here you can see out my push pin here, I can see this is where I'm supposed to be. And as I zoom out and I zoom in, I can see exactly where I am when I punch in and punch out. I also have my breadcrumbs over here because I have the geo-tracking turned on for this particular client, right? But I'm able to see exactly where I am when I punch in and out. So those are the great tools, but also in here I can see, was it really John that punched in, right? So I have a difference here in terms of facial here versus not. The facial recognition still works whether you have facial here or not, right? So that's really helpful to see that, yeah, that really is John that punched in. You know what, I can go ahead and accept that punch, right? Now, there are other tools as well that are in here just to help managers manage the employees from alerts to see whether or not you're going over your budget alert, making sure employees are there when they're supposed to be. And if they're not, I want to be notified so that I can staff properly. Maybe employees go into overtime, I want to keep track of that. But also, more importantly, from more of an executive side is our analytics, right? Because the analytics are going to look at the data and say, who's touching the employee's punches, right? When we start to look at touching the employee's punches, we look at different things. We look at how many times somebody goes in and changes a punch, how many times there's exceptions in the system, how many manual punches are coming into the system, how many times somebody's going in and changing a rate for an employee in the timesheet, how quickly are those managers getting into the system and making the corrections, right? When you couple all of these different KPIs together and you start to score your managers, you start to see who's doing well and who's not, who needs additional training, but then you can also start to identify possible issues, right? And just because you see something in here that, hey, I've got a lot of manual punches coming in the system, doesn't necessarily mean that it's something bad. It can be something bad, right? If I got a lot of manual punches, there's a very high likelihood that there may be some ghost payroll going on, right? But without seeing the data here, I have no idea that it's really happening because it may not be happening enough for me to notice it. But if I look at this and I set my values here, so my blue is my actual, the red is my my baseline, which could be historical data. It can be based off of a value I want, it can be based off of industry standards. But what's great about that is that it's going to help me identify those problem areas in here. But then even furthermore, I can even get down to specific employees because what we end up seeing is that 80% of the noise is caused by 20% of the people, right? It's a stat that we see across all of our customers. But I'm able to look at this information now, and I have the actual intelligence to tell me that, I've got a problem at Soldier Field. I've got 100% of my punches coming in manual. That's a big problem, right? And again, it doesn't necessarily mean that something negative is happening. We had a customer that they had a lot of exceptions coming into the system, and it had nothing to do with somebody buddy punching or things like that, but it did help them crack down on a little bit of that, because what happened is that their employees spoke mainly Somali, right, which isn't a standard language pack in our system. What we ended up doing is giving them a cheat sheet that they can follow along in Somali so that they can punch in and out while they're following along in English. They saw a reduction from 83% down to 1% to 2%, which becomes a lot more manageable for the manager to look at that information and now start to identify, is this really a problem, or, am I okay with this? And they approve the punch, right? I had another customer that, again, they weren't doing something wrong by the employees, but they were changing the employees' rates every Saturday because they were supposed to be getting overtime. Now, we have rules that we can set up in the system that just automatically do that versus somebody manually going in and making those changes. And again, without management knowing that this is happening, this manager would have just kept doing this over and over again because he thought that's what he was supposed to do. So the tools are meant to help with identifying the time theft, but it's also meant to help and identify areas of improvement where, I give 2 examples here. The exceptions and the rates. One is a training issue, one is a setup issue, right? And then you have your manual punches where, yeah, there could be ghost payroll over there, and I can need to go in and check it. But without me knowing it, my manager at site is not telling me that, hey, I've got so many exceptions that I'm just accepting them all. He's not telling his manager that. And his manager probably isn't telling his manager, and so on. So it doesn't move up that food chain. That's why this becomes important for that. What's also great about this, though, is that we've seen customers that see a labor reduction in their labor cost by 3%, right? That's a big cost saving. So not only just with time theft, but just overall efficiency, because they're now no longer spending an hour, 2 hours making corrections. They're in there spending 5 minutes a day making a correction versus waiting until payroll to make those corrections. Correction lag is also an important one that we look at. How quickly are they coming into the system and making the corrections? Because what we see is that if they make that correction within 24 hours, the data is so much more accurate that they see a reduction in the number of retro checks that are happening because their data is just that much more accurate. You start to expand that out, and you start to see more retro checks happen, right? But then also you can start to see, are my managers scheduling employees correctly, or are they always calling Johnny Reliable in for overtime, right? So, I'm getting 30 hours overtime when in reality I could spread this out to other employees who maybe their rates are even lower, right? So again, trying to manage budget and just ensuring that managers are trained properly, but also giving you the insight into, are there potential issues here by looking at these analytics?
Thank you, John. I think there's a lot of things you can do to control the cost that's associated with just time theft and other areas where labor can cost you more than it needs to be because of, either management not following good practices or not staying on top of things that need to get edited and changed. We're going to have an opportunity here for a few minutes to answer any questions that you may have. You can go to the right side of the screen, and in the box, there's a question box. You just type them in there, and we'll be happy to answer them. I know I have one question. I think I know the answer to this, but I thought maybe John might want to go over it. Is other types of data collection methods that we have, and how reliable can they be on controlling time theft, such as an IVR platform?
So an IVR platform, you have no true way of identifying that it really is that person that's punching in and punching out, because all they're doing is they're entering in their employee number. However, we do know that they're on site because we do use caller ID to identify where they are when they punch in and punch out. So at least you know that they are on site, or at least somebody is on site to work, right? But you don't really know that it's that person because, I can't put a face to a voice, right? So, and really they're not even talking into the system. It's just voice prompted for them to go through. If you look at our web punch, similar concept there where we use IP address filtering to identify where they are, but I can give my credentials to Michelle, and Michelle can punch in for me if I give her my credentials.
All right. Well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our full suite of applications. Again, we are a human capital management provider, and we spent a lot of time today on time and labor management on our products there and our data collection devices. Specifically, we talked about our two different clocks, our larger clock, really more our industrial strength clock that has a fingerprint biometrics and also has a camera too to take a snapshot when there's a mispunch, a fingerprint mismatch. We showed you our S18, our slim clock, which is very durable and small, fits in a lot of places, but is very powerful with its facial biometrics. And then, of course, we showed you our mobile app, which uses facial biometrics to punch folks in. But we have a full suite of solutions from really the recruiting piece where you're out looking for your applicants and your skilled workforce, applicant tracking and recruiting. Then we have human resources management, specifically that onboarding of that new employee, doing electronic onboarding where we are managing the I-9 process and all the onboarding forms in the system electronically and storing them there. A benefit administration system that allows your employees to do open enrollment or as they become full-time employees, sign up for their benefits. Of course, our time and labor management system, which we gave you a small peek into, didn't really go into the payroll engine. Payroll and tax management, so we can handle payroll and process payroll. And finally, performance management, so that you can really appraise folks that are working for you and set goals for them and track to that. So that is our full suite. Doesn't look like we have any more questions, so we're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for joining us. John, thank you for doing a wonderful demonstration. Really appreciate that.
Thank you, everybody that joined us today. Really appreciate it.
We would love to be able to give you a more personalized demonstration, so just let us know. When you exit today, you'll take a quick survey, tell us how we did and anything you would like for us to answer for you. There's an option to take a larger tour of our solution if you'd like to do that, or request a personalized demonstration with John, where we'll get to know you a little bit and be able to show you specifically anything within our time and labor management system or our full suite. So thank you again for your time. Thanks again, John. And at EPAY, we would love to be your human capital management provider. Thanks again. Have a great day.